again.
You're listening to the Mac and Jack Sports Show on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Mac and Jack Sports Show, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, 8 to 10 a.m., Wednesday through Sunday. You can see our Facebook shows on Mac Sports and Northeast Streaming Sports Network, with our platforms also on Twitter and Instagram. Like, follow, comment, share, and subscribe when possible. Check out the website on macandjacksports.com called Max Insiders for information on weekly guests, articles, team public relation updates, a list of shows on Northeast Streaming Sports, and our great sponsors with links to their products and services. I'm Mac with your co-host, Jack Hirsch, the legendary boxing writer and former president of the Boxing Writers Association of America, bringing you national sports with special focus on Northeast professional sports from New York, Boston, and Philly. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning, guys.
How you doing today? And our special guest that comes on almost every week, every Saturday on our debate show is Dr. Paul Semendinger, a great Major League Baseball analyst, a Yankees historian and expert, and we enjoy having him on every week. How you doing today, Doc?
I'm doing great, and I think I enjoy being on with you probably more than you enjoy having me. I look forward to this every week.
I get a break from Mac when you're around.
That's
so
true.
You have a lot of value that way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's always an honor.
And don't undersell yourself, Doc. We love having you on.
Thank you.
So, guys, we're going to do our sports update real quick. And Tommy Lasorda, the great manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers, passed away. And what are your thoughts on Tom Lasorda? Starting with Jack, what do you remember, or think about when you talk about Tom Lasorda, Jack?
One of the great characters of the game. I mean, had a ton of personality, a funny guy. His players loved him. I remember once during the World Series with the Yankees and Dodgers, he was trying to buy some time, so he went out to the mound to talk to the pitcher. He wanted to stretch it out so his guy in the bullpen would have a few extra pitches. So the umpire saying, "Come on, Tommy, let's move it along." And Lasorda saying, "I'm not sure what to do. What do you think? What do you think I should do? Should I take him out? Should I leave him in?" You know, just like kidding around that way. There was another time, Tommy John, who we send our best to, who has COVID right now, by the way. We send our best. But Tommy John was telling a story where he rode to the ballpark with him and one of his other teammates with Tommy Lasorda, who was the manager. And Tommy Lasorda found them when they got to the ballpark, and Tommy Lasorda told them they were late. And Tommy John is arguing, "What do you mean I'm late? I came in with you." And Tommy Lasorda said, "Well, you should know to come in with someone more dependable." So that was Tommy Lasorda, you know, is a ton of personality. And I remember at the casino in Las Vegas once, Tommy Lasorda was walking through, and I just remember the crowd around him, you know, the way he attracted people. I mean, what a personality. You talk about bleeding Dodger blue. I mean, he really bled Dodger blue. And I was listening to Oral Hershiser talking before, saying that Tommy Lasorda, who just passed away at age 93, he willed himself to live a little longer to see the Dodgers win another World Series. I mean, but just one of the great, you know, personalities of the game. And a heck of a manager, you know, led the United States to an Olympic gold medal in Sydney in 2000. And managed them to the 1981 World Series win over the Yankees, and the 1988, you know, World Series win over the Oakland A's, and a lot of other good seasons, and just one of the great personalities of baseball of all time.
And what do you think about the memory and the what Tom Lasorda did for baseball and especially for the Dodgers, Doc.
Well, I mean, he was one of the great managers. He replaced Walter Alston, who was also one of the great managers. And, you're asking for the memories. Now, when you first become a baseball fan or a fan of any sport, obviously you latch onto a team most often, and then that team becomes the be all and end all. And when I was a kid, it was obviously the Yankees. And so Tommy Lasorda was, even by then, 1977, 78, even though he was early on in his tenure with the Dodgers, extremely respected as a great manager. So, I just kept watching this other guy in the other dugout and rooting against him because he had to be the bad guy. But even then, as a kid, watching the Dodgers, knowing what a great manager he was and seeing how his team played hard for him and seeing how he rooted with his players. And I remember the Reggie play in 1978 when he threw out his hip and all the arguing and even thinking to myself back then as a 10-year-old, like, I think he's got a good point, but I hope the umpires don't agree with him. I also remember that when he was he transcended generations and he made baseball, as Jack was saying, lots of fun for everybody. He made it fun for his players. He made it fun for grown-ups. But there was a show that I don't think people remember as much. In the early 80s, it was called The Baseball Bunch. And Johnny Bench ran the show, and they used to have the San Diego Chicken on it. And Tommy Lasorda was a frequent guest. He was like a guru who would help little kids understand the game more. And then, of course, as you grow up, you don't necessarily hate the opposition. You respect them. You grow up, you mature, your emotions change. And I remember just being in awe of him in 1988 with the moves he made, sending up Kirk Gibson in that first game of the World Series, and just saying, boy, this guy is a baseball classic, and he's someone that deserves our ultimate respect. And it's just always sad when baseball's lost a lot of great people over the last year, and he's just the latest in a long line of people who can never be replaced and should always be remembered.
Yeah, Doc, when Gibson hits that homer, the camera goes on Tommy Lasorda going out of the dugout as much as it went on Kirk Gibson.
Yeah, so we send our thoughts out to Tommy Lasorda's family and a great baseball mind and a great manager in baseball. So switching to today's wild card games, guys, we got the Colts at Buffalo, the Rams at Seattle, and the Bucks at Washington. Jack, what are your thoughts on those games today?
Wow, we're talking about it again. I thought we were, they're playing today. It's not exactly football Sunday. Well, if anyone's going to spring an upset in those three games, I mean, and I don't consider the Ram-Seattle game an upset in any way, shape, or form. Whoever wins, even though Seattle's favored by a few points, it's a pick-em game, but the chances of the Washington Redskins beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are extremely slim as far as I'm concerned. Let's not forget the Redskins are 7-9 team. The Buccaneers are primed for this. This season's on the line. If the Redskins lose, the season's still a success for them. If the Buccaneers lose, the season's, could just be deemed as a failure despite an 11-5 record. And they're too well balanced, the Buccaneers overall. I know the Redskins defensively, you can make an argument that they're as good as the Buccaneers, maybe even a little better. But offensively, it's no contest with all the Buccaneer weapons. Their running backs, Leonard Fournette, Jones, and their receivers. It's just no contest there as far as I'm concerned. Colts and Bills is a very intriguing game. I mean, Buffalo's primed for this, it's 13-3. But how often have we seen teams that have been primed that have slipped up in the playoffs? And Josh Allen has had a great year quarterback. And who would have thought he would have taken this leap to be one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL? People weren't even sure whether he was Buffalo's franchise quarterback going into this year, because he'd made so many mistakes, so many turnovers before. But him and Stefon Diggs have been a great combination this year. But Buffalo should win the game, but it wouldn't shock me if Indy pulled an upset.
We have Jim Harbaugh signs an extension to stay in Michigan. Surprises me because of the success rate of Michigan, which isn't that great. I mean, they've fallen from a top team to not being able to beat Ohio State to not being able to beat Michigan State. And I mean, it hasn't worked out to me having a former head coach that took an NFL team to a Super Bowl, go to college, in the recruitment of these players they thought would really make Michigan State Michigan a powerhouse again, and that hasn't happened. Any one of you got thoughts on that, Jack or Doc?
Well, my thoughts on it, I was surprised they signed him to that type of extension. But when you look at the contract carefully, they're kind of out clauses after every year. Obviously, they still have faith in Jim Harbaugh, and that's a good thing in a day and age where coaches are fired so readily when you don't get the results when the ownership, the university doesn't get the results they want. That's kind of refreshing that they're going to stick with a guy who hasn't lived up to expectations, but they have a certain faith in him and a certain belief in him, and it just shows us once again something we sometimes forget when we evaluate things from the outside. We never know the relationships that people have internally, how they really get along. So, and this is a case, obviously, there's a solid relationship with the university and Harbaugh, and moving forward, maybe both parties will be rewarded for it.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Doc, as far as, keeping on somebody when the program continues to fall? I mean, you would have thought that Jim Harbaugh going there would have improved Michigan to back to where it was in its great history as being, up there around at least the national championship talk.
He came there with a lot of, positive press. He had done a great job with the 49ers, and it hasn't worked out. But, as Jack said, you do like to see that, colleges or franchises, major leagues or football or college, NCAA, that they show some type of a loyalty and some type of a patience with a guy. I think he's a great football mind. I don't think anybody's ever doubted that. And in the short term, the results haven't been there. But maybe, you give him another shot at it, and over time it'll work. I do know that he was on the short list, or at least rumored to be on a short list for the Jets. So maybe they felt like he's building a program. Sometimes it takes a while for a program to really become what they're looking for it to be. And they said, we better do something before we don't lose them to the Jets.
Yeah. And, I don't know, guys. I think that maybe it's going on long enough. I mean, he's been there for quite a few years now. And, a lot of former players and coaches in football, Perkins was one of them that went back to Alabama, don't have the same effect on college as they do pros. Of course, it's two different games. The DOJ.
I think it's just the opposite, Doc. I think they don't have the same effect in most cases. Elite college coaches going to the NFL, even the great Nick Saban. He's arguably the greatest college coach of all time, arguably. But when he was head coach of the Miami Dolphins, he really wasn't a top of the line coach. Lou Holtz coming from Notre Dame. It's something to keep in mind with Urban Meyer taking the Jacksonville Jaguar job. It doesn't mean he's going to be successful because he's had a high level of success in college.
Well, and of course we know that, Pete Carroll had a shot his first time around, didn't do so well, but now he is a great coach for the Seattle Seahawks. The DOJ warns NCAA over name and likeness rules and transfer rules. 6 states have passed various name and images and likeness laws. The NCAA desires the DOJ and the congressional intervention to get protection from legal challenges and alterations it makes as a result. So with 6 states lining up, actually, passing laws that if you're going to use a college player's likeness, that he ought to get some kind of reimbursement. The NCAA has now filed or asked the DOJ not to have other suits based off this rule. In other words, there could be other suits because that lead to different avenues to sue the NCAA, and they're trying to protect themselves even with these laws in the 6 states. So they're going national. They want the national, the congressional, the Congress, maybe the Senate or whoever, to protect them to some point. What I think, gentlemen, is that they should have never started this. They opened a can of worms by promoting likenesses and images of these players without actually naming them. We know who they're talking about when they have a quarterback for instance, Trevor Lawrence for Clemson. You don't have to say his name. We all know who he is. So they're making money off that as far as selling this as some kind of promotion. So I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on it. I just don't think the NCAA should have ever went down that avenue.
I don't know what to really say with the NCAA and all these laws going on. I mean, normally I have a strong opinion on such matters, but with the NCAA, I gave up a long time ago. I could never make any logic of them. Their strictness was to such a point where they brought this on themselves. Had they just loosened up in the beginning all along, I mean, if an athlete needed root canal, he had a bad toothache, he was in pain, the coach couldn't take him even to the dentist, that type of thing. And it's, I really don't have much sympathy for the NCAA. This particular case, I'm not sure of, quite honestly. I've heard about it, I've read about it, and what the laws are with using someone's likeness. And I'm not sure what their rights are, but the NCAA really needs a facelift.
Yeah, I agree. Doc,
I think if you're going to use a player's name and sell jerseys with his number on the back and make money off of him, and the NCAA, it's a big business. Basketball's a huge business. Football's a ginormous business. And, they're making money off these players, off these kids. And the kids don't get a chance to see any of that money. And there's just something on that's on its face wrong. And it's not right. If you're selling a jersey with my name on the back, and if anybody would like to sell jerseys with my name on the back, that's a lot of letters. So I don't think you want to do that. But if they are, the person whose jersey it is, should reap some of those rewards. They're making a lot of money for their colleges and for the NCAA. And it's really unfair to the kids that other people are making money off them and they don't get to see any of it coming back at them.
There's one thought I have on that. I agree with Jack. I mean, buying somebody a sandwich shouldn't be breaking a rule. But if you start paying them, it now not becomes amateur anymore. It becomes professional. Once it becomes professional, can they form a union? This is a wide scope, slippery slope that if the NCAA just left it alone, we wouldn't be talking about this. And if they just loosen up their rules, as Jack said, we wouldn't be talking about this, and the NCAA would not be in the spot right now. But it can go a lot farther, guys, and I'm just a little worried about that. So with that being said, let's talk to a little bit of baseball. So there you go, folks. Meet the Mets, as we all know, is their theme song. The Mets have made some great moves under owner Steve Cohen. They've picked up a catcher. They've upgraded that with McCann. They now sign or trade for Lindor, who they will eventually have to sign. A great young shortstop with a little pop in his bat. And they have improved an already, what I feel, solid team to become maybe the favorite to win that division. I don't know if they're done yet or not, but they sure have improved the team, Jack.
Yeah, don't forget Carlos Carrasco in that deal, because they got a starting pitcher for their rotation who a couple of years ago, I mean, he was a solid number 2, maybe even a number 1. He could have been for some staffs. The question is how much Steve Cohen is willing to lose, how much money. I mean, he hasn't gone over the luxury tax yet, which I think is $210 million a year, but they're kind of starting to get closer. They're going to have to be a little creative. And of course, they're going to have to sign Francisco Lindor to a major extension, how much they're willing to pay. And the image Steve Cohen has given across Major League Baseball, this is a guy who's willing to do whatever it takes. So the players are going to hold out. They're going to want top dollar. Scott Boras is singing the man's praises. But Steve Cohen is a businessman. He's worth supposedly $14 billion. We don't know his attitude, whether Steve Cohen's going to think, okay, I'm willing to lose $2-3 billion to get a World Series winner. If that's his attitude, he's a dangerous man for the other teams. But if that's not his attitude, if he's the same guy who accumulated his wealth, he's giving Met fans the big bang, which is great because that's what they expected. Is it going to keep up? Is he going to go crazy, sign Trevor Bauer, George Springer? I read that George Springer is holding out something like $175 million for 5 years. Okay, and if my math is correct, that's $35 million a year. That's insane. That's insane to make George Springer one of the highest paid players in the game. But if they're going to pay George Springer around $30 million, the other team should rejoice in a way, because Steve Cohen isn't going to get the value for his buck. And a man like that is going to see in a couple of years, wow, I paid all this money and I'm not getting my money's worth. And he might get disgusted and come back down to earth a little bit. But the Lindor strategy to get him 1 year left on the contract is fine, because when you look what the Mets gave up, they gave up Ahmad Rosario, their shortstop, Andres Jimenez, their second baseman, and a couple of other names, not top-of-the-line prospects, so that's not a concern. Ahmad Rosario, I guess, is a centerpiece. He's going to be the Indian shortstop now to replace Lindor. A little better than average player, basically. So they didn't give up that much, the Mets, okay? So that's the good thing, getting McCann at a reasonable price, James McCann, for 4 years, a little over $40 million. The Mets will get their money's worth. Trevor May is a middle reliever, 2 years, $15 million, not bad. And let's see where it goes. They're looking to make one more move. Talk is they're looking to get Chris Bryant some way from the Cubs. Now, that would be massive. That would be a heck of a deal. And everyone in New York now, Yankee fans, are still somewhat patient, knowing the Yankees' history of pulling something out of the hat or waiting. But if the Yankees should lose LeMayo, it doesn't have to be to the Mets. It could be to anyone. Wow, that's going to be a blow. The two teams going in other directions, because Brian Cashman thinks the Yankees are good enough to win right now. Just basically, let's sign DJ LeMayo and let's tweak the team a little bit. But we might be going back to the mid-'80s again, guys, where it becomes a little more of a Met town, okay, than a Yankee town. But it won't be as bad, because the Yankees are going to be competitive up there regardless. But if you look at the Yankee team carefully, I'm not so sure that they're even a playoff team. Not so sure, okay, the way I am every year. But the Mets are definitely on an upswing, and there's excitement in Flushing, I'll tell you that.
What do you think, Doc? What do you think about, the Mets moves and what their future looks like now?
When Steve Cohen came, he said, I'm not here to make money on the Mets. I'm here to make the Mets a winner. He said something like that. And he is doing everything possible to make the Mets relevant and to make the Mets exciting. And they're capturing New York interest. As Jack mentioned, I actually wrote this the other day. I'd written a similar piece back in December. New York has often been a National League town traditionally. And when the 1980s were going on, people remember the Yankees differently. They remember the Yankees as a bad team in the 1980s, but the Yankees were not, until the very end of the decade, a bad team. The Yankees were actually very good. And the Yankees had superstars. They had Dave Winfield. They had Ron Guidry. They had Ricky Henderson. They had Don Mattingly, who might have been the greatest player in the game at the time. This was not a team that was a bad team. And the Yankees were in the mix year after year after year. And in the 1980s, the Mets were New York baseball. The Yankees were very good and almost great, but the Mets and they only won one World Series, but the Mets were the team of New York. The first team to draw 3 million fans wasn't the Yankees. It was the Mets.
Yeah.
And the Yankees, I think oftentimes live on their reputation. And they are the team of championships, and they're the team that goes after and gets the big, expensive players. Except that's really not what they've done over the last 12 years, 11 years since George Steinbrenner died, since 2009. In 2009, the Yankees said, you know what? We want to win a World Series. They went out, they got Mark Teixeira. They went out, they got A.J. Burnett. And, of course, they went out and got CC Sabathia. And they said, we're going to do everything we can to win a World Series. Since then, they have let countless great players pass. And it's a different philosophy. And we're going to build the core. And they have a very good core. A lot of young superstar type players, including Gary Sanchez, who hasn't lived up to his billing. But, Aaron Judge, they find diamonds in the rough like Luke Voigt and Gio Urshela. They sign a few big name guys like Garrett Cole. They make a big trade a few years ago for Giancarlo Stanton. But the Yankees seem to almost be reluctant to jump all the way in, while the Mets now under Steve Cohen, I think, are jumping all the way in. And they're saying, you know what, we're going to make lots of moves. We're not done yet. Steve Cohen put out something after he got Lindor about, everybody keeps talking about the trade, but, our alternate black uniforms are awful exciting too. And I don't know why people aren't talking about it. He's making them fun. The Yankees were saying, we hope to get DJ LeMahieu. We hope he comes around. And if he does, that will be our move this winter. And, we've talked about this before. LeMahieu is a great player. He's terrific. He's also going to be 33. If the Yankees sign him for 5 years, I don't think you're going to get a superstar player for 5 years. In 5 years, Francisco Lindor will be the age DJ LeMahieu is now. Francisco Lindor is a character. He brings a lot of interest. You heard after the Mets got him that he's a great clubhouse presence. He's known as Mr. Smile. He's going to bring energy. He's going to bring fun to the Mets. And I think the Yankees have to wake up and say, you know what? We've got an opponent in the city who just might, and they might have already, overtaken us as far as a guy who brings interest, fun, and excitement. And just one other quick note. Since 2004, the Yankees and the Mets have been in the same amount of World Series.
Right, you're 100% right. 100%.
Great franchise. They're not winning. If the idea is you're successful when you win and you reach the World Series, if that's the Yankees' model of success, they're failing. They're not there. They haven't been there.
I've said, Doc, over the last few years, the pitching philosophy of the Yankees, minus Cole, has been, let's get a great relief pitching, a pitching bullpen, but the heck with their starting pitching. And it hasn't worked in the big games, in the playoffs against big teams. They signed Cole, but their pitching staff, we don't know what's going to happen with Severino or Herman. We don't know for sure. We think that maybe they'll come aboard and be good for the staff, but we don't know that because they've been hurt or they've been suspended. So when the middle of the season, when the trade deadline came up, the Yankees don't even try to get a starting pitcher. They sign another reliever. And I don't know how long they're going to go with this strategy because it works in the regular season when you're beating up on teams, third, fourth, fifth pitching rotation guy. But it doesn't work when you're going up against their best and when you reach the playoffs. It hasn't worked. So I don't know why Cashman did last year, but I'll tell you right now, he better start making some moves this year.
There are not a lot of quality starting pitchers out there you can get. I mean, there are very few. There's Trevor Bauer, but do you really want to invest 5+ years on a guy like him. Okay, he's had 2 good years in a row. He was so before then. Before then, and his personality is a major issue. It's a major risk. Okay, you invest all those years in a guy. Let's say they sign him to a 6-year deal, and in the first year they find out he's a loose cannon, and he reverts back to the form he was a couple of years ago, being a so-so pitcher, and you're locked into all those years. Okay,
I know.
it's very risky.
Listen, I understand that about Jack Bauer. I'm talking about last year when there were some good starting pitchers on not so good teams that might have been interested in a trade for maybe some minor league players or maybe for some secondhand utility players and maybe even one of our stars.
But Mac, let me just cut in. If the
good morning,
Yankees,
Sal, too. Go ahead.
if Tampa Bay would have been willing to trade Blake Snell to the Yankees would have given them great value for a pitcher like that. Probably Clint Frazier would have been part of that package. That's how good Blake Snell is. But Tampa Bay wasn't going to trade an elite pitcher to a rival in their division.
Yeah,
And Charlie
I
Morton the same way. He goes to Atlanta. They're not going to allow, it's...
listen, Jack, I understand that. I'm talking about there are some pitchers that are not on some great teams. Detroit, even I think it was Cleveland, who had a couple good young pitchers that have potential. And I think trades could be made. But again, it is what it is. We got Derek Cole, and I don't know if we're going to sign Tanaka.
Derek Cole, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if we're going to even sign Tanaka.
How much does Tanaka have left in the tank? That's
exactly right.
Well.
Another good question. Let me just jump in here real fast. Since the trade deadline, and this is just off the top of my head, so I might be missing something, or there might be. I think Clevenger was traded this year. It might have been last year. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. But the Yankees have Garrett Cole, and then they have a series of question marks. Jordan Montgomery's coming off a big injury. We don't know about Domingo Germán. Severino, we hope he comes back in the middle of the season. But pitchers coming back off Tommy John surgery don't necessarily do great when they first come back. And he really hasn't been great since the first half of the 2018 season. That's a long time ago. You're not talking 3 full years. And in that time, Lance Lynn has moved. He went this winter. Yu Darvish has moved. He went this winter. Carlos Carrasco has just gone to the Mets in the Lindor trade. Blake Snell, all right, they weren't going to trade him to the Yankees, but he has moved. There was just a great Japanese pitcher, Sagano, who just decided not to come to America, and he's going to stay with the Yomiuri Giants. And as I said, Clevenger, I believe, went last year. Stroman the year before to the Mets from the Blue Jays. That's a whole lot of good pitching. That's not Trevor Bauer. That the Yankees have not been in on any of those guys. Or at least haven't gotten them, and you haven't even heard any rumors where the Yankees have been on them. So it's not like there isn't pitching that's been available that the Yankees could have at least been players on. I'm not saying they have to get every player, but you'd like to see them at least saying like, hey, we're trying to get Lance Lynn, or we're trying to get Yu Darvish. These guys get traded, and the Yankees are like, yeah, well, we're watching DJ LeMahieu.
Well, Darvish comes with an expensive price tag. I mean,
yeah, that is true.
Anyone, if you're willing to pay. I mean, the Yankees could get Trevor Bauer if they're willing to lay out crazy money. I mean, for us, we want to see him on the Yankees because he's pairing him with Garrett Cole gives you a dynamic 1-2. But the price tag, it's not worth it for a lot of these guys.
Well, again, Jack, we're not talking just about Trevor Bauer. We're talking about moves that Cashman could have made that didn't make, or at least tried to make. All he said is, we're going to win with what we got. And that's all he said. And to me, that's not good enough answer.
Well, Brian Cashman traditionally has made so many great moves for the Yankees. How could we be criticizing him that much? I mean, I just don't see it.
Because we want some starting pitching, Jack. That's why we're criticizing him. And
James
that's all.
Paxton was hurt.
Paxton is a 500 pitcher anyway, Jack. But anyways,
I don't know. What about Greg Allen? We picked up Greg Allen.
Jack, we're going to our Yankees poll question. So let's see what we got here. So, folks, we just did our Mets little update. Let's get to the Yankees. There was a poll putting up in 3 different Yankee groups. Now, the answer to this sounds simple, and it was for most people. The greatest and best Yankees rivalry in history. Now, everybody, of course, would say the Boston Red Sox. That's an easy answer. But as we know, being lifelong Yankee fans, there were a couple of the rivalries that were very strong and very heated at certain times in their history. One is the Brooklyn Dodgers. I mean, them two were going at it all the time for the pennant. The Yanks-Royal rivalry in the 70s, where the Yankees had to come from behind a couple times to beat them in dramatic fashion. And, of course, we have the Yankees-Mets, which maybe is more a rivalry for the sports newspapers than it is actually a game. They did meet once in the World Series, and they do play interleague play. So, guys, I mean, Red Sox is the easy answer. But if you take in consideration the Dodgers rivalry, which at that time was even bigger than the Red Sox rivalry, the Royals of the 70s, and now the Mets, who would you go with?
Well, I'll just say in the 1950s, especially the early 50s, when the Yankees and Dodgers had that great rivalry. I think an even bigger rivalry in New York was the Dodgers and Giants.
True.
I think if you asked Dodger fans at the time who they hate more, wow, that would have been kind of like a toss-up. It's different eras. The problem is the Yankees couldn't play the Dodgers in interleague play after the Dodgers moved from Brooklyn. And all those decades that passed, and they could only play one another in the World Series. And there were still a lot of Dodger fans left over in New York when the Dodgers broke their hearts and left Brooklyn and went to Los Angeles. And even though they adopted the Mets, the Dodgers always had a special place in their heart. But by the time the Dodgers played the Yankees again in the World Series in 1977, 78, and 81, the rivalry wasn't as intense anymore. I mean, it just wasn't. The Yankees-Red Sox took over. It started in the late 70s, and then it resurfaced in the 90s and in the early 200s. And it's still a little bit going on to this day. Not so much, but it could resurface again. Yankees-Red Sox, I think, was the most intense rivalry because you had the characters, okay? You had the Red Sox players that were easy to hate from a Yankee perspective, as we had the players that were easy for, to hate from their perspective. I mean, who could like Pedro Martinez, okay? And then you had Manny Ramirez, Curt Schilling. I mean, they were the villains to us, like we were the villains to them with A-Rod and so on. Yankees, Red Sox, I mean, what a rivalry. I remember the 2003 playoff Game 7 when the Yankees won it on Aaron Boone's home run. I wish I was watching the game alone at home. I wasn't at the game. I wish someone had been recording me. I mean, I was jumping up and down, bouncing around. You would crack up laughing if you saw a video of me. Like the joy, I was like one of the players. And Yankee Red Sox was the absolute ultimate as far as rivalries go in baseball to me as a Yankee fan.
What do you think, Doc?
I think the biggest rivalry is definitely the Yankees and the Red Sox. The Yankees Mets, it's as you said, it's a battle for the city. They haven't really battled except for that World Series in 2000 against each other in fact, it's been pretty fluid. When the Yankees have been good, for the most parts, the Mets haven't. And when the Mets have been reaching the World Series, the Yankees haven't, even if you go back to like the early 70s and 69 Mets and things like that. Those series against the Royals were amazing. And year after year, and those two teams, I think, genuinely hated each other. You remember Hal McRae barreling into Willie Randolph. You remember George Brett and Greg Nettles actually fighting in the middle of a game. And neither one of them actually were ejected either, as I recall. I'm going to throw one more rivalry at you that's long forgotten, but it was probably the one of the first, if not the first, great Yankee rivalries, and that was with actually the New York Giants.
Yeah.
You know, the Yankees played home games in the Polo Grounds. They rented from the Giants. And by the early 1920s, the Yankees, you know, they got Babe Ruth, and then they started outdrawing the Giants. And the Giants said, well, we don't want you in our stadium if you're going to outdraw us. So the Yankees then built their own stadium right across the river. I mean, like you want to talk about firing a shot. You can't don't let us in your stadium. All right, we're going to put one up right across the river, and it's going to be bigger and grander. And I believe Yankee Stadium was the first building even called a stadium. You know, like it was the Polo Grounds and this Yankee Stadium, and they built it across the river. And the two teams actually met in the World Series three consecutive years. When does that ever happen?
Right.
In 21, the Giants won. In 22, the Giants won. And then in 23, with the advent of Yankee Stadium, then the Yankees win the World Series. So, you know, that's a long forgotten battle between those two New York Giants of New York baseball, between the Yankees and the Giants. That was also a great rivalry.
So, guys, we got our Yankees trivia question today. And, of course, I go way back because you guys are so knowledgeable of the Yankees history. So this comes again from the Rising of a Franchise, a great book about the New York Yankees. Pick it up if you do like the Yankees. And if you just do like baseball, it's a great read. So for the Yankees trivia question, guys, we have, what did the Yankees infielders used to do? Now we're going way back in the beginning. What did the Yankee infielders used to do in the middle of the game in the very early years, guys?
In the middle of the game in the early years. I thought you were going to say something like between innings, leave their gloves on the field and just.
I thought the same thing.
Dugout. They used to, wait, well, let me get this straight. What they used to do in the early innings of a game during the game?
In the middle of the game, in the very early years, Jack, what did all the infielders do at the same time? So right in the middle of a game.
All the infielders did it at the same time.
Yes.
They saluted to the babe. I don't know. I mean, what did they do? They waved to the crowd. They did the roll call to the fans. I just don't know.
What do you think, Doc?
All right. So the silly answer would be that they did the YMCA, right? Like the Yankees did it, but they didn't do that.
I want to talk about that when we're done.
Someday. Here's my guess. I don't know this. It's just a guess. I'm going to say that they raked the infield.
No, what they did, and you were pretty close, Doc. This is when, it was called a joy team, where they didn't do a lot of winning, but they had a lot of fun. They would break into song, and they would all start singing together during the middle of a game. The heck with the baseball game. They just wanted to have fun. So we think of the Yankees franchise as always being great. That's not true, especially when they first started out. But they all would have a sing-along during the middle of the game where the pitcher would actually stop pitching. And they would just sing a song together. So there you go.
I want to say something. Someone said something. Was it you, Mac Brown's crew? We're just kidding around the dock. What bothers me a lot, and it shouldn't bother me, when I'm at a ball game and the grounds crew is doing their job, they run out, they're playing the YMCA music. These guys are professionals. They're doing their job. I know I'm maybe taking it too seriously, but I think it's demeaning to these guys. And I'm sure it bothers some of them. And the fans are reacting like they have to put on a show. They're fixing up the infield. They're doing their job. Don't spotlight these guys by playing the music and so on. I just don't like it at all. I mean, maybe I'm the only one, but I think I regard them as professionals, that they're doing a job. And it kind of looks clownish to put them in that spot. I just don't like it. It's unfair to them.
Okay, so with that, Jack, let's get into our debate show. This one for the folks at home, of course, has always been talk about the speed of baseball, how slow the game is, and how that makes it maybe more difficult to watch. So, Jack will go first. Should rules be established to speed up the game of baseball, Jack?
Mac, the answer is yes. If you go to a game, look at the stands in the third inning of the game, the fourth inning of the game. The stands are packed. I say third or fourth inning because people is sometimes late and it's not always full by the first inning. But the stands that are full by the third, fourth inning of a sellout crowd, by the ninth inning, people are leaving, even if it's a close game. And that tells you the game's lasting a little too long. That and they want to beat traffic as well. I understand. But how many times have we watched games on TV? I can't talk for Doc. Maybe he's a more of a fanatic than I am. A Yankee game begins at 7:05. I'm a bit tired. It's 10:40 at night. And we're in the last of the seventh, top of the eighth. I'd love to see the end of the game. It's a one-run game tied up. I'm going to sleep. I tell myself, I'm just a little too tired. The games are lasting a little too long. Now, once in a while, we have an extra long game. That's okay. That's understood, but it has to be an exception to the rule. There's too much going on where the games are getting longer and longer and longer. And there's certain things we can do to make it shorter. It's like kind of cutting the fat off the meat when you have a good steak. It's, let's put a pitch clock on all the batters and the pitchers. Don't allow the batter to step out of the batter's box. Once you're in the batter's box, you got to stay in the batter's box. If you get a speck of dust in your eye, tough luck. Bear down. The pitcher shouldn't be allowed to just go off the pitching mound, step off. If he does, they should call a ball on him, okay? There should be a penalty. Same way with the batter. You step out of the box, it's a strike. If you have 2 strikes on you and you step out of the box, guess what? You're out. A runner gets on first base. You want to hold him on. I'm sick of the pitcher who keeps throwing to first base to hold the runner on. Cap a team. Cap a team at 5 pitches for the whole game to hold a run on base. Think of how exciting that'll be. You get a speedy run on first base. He wants to make the pitcher use up his quota of 5 pitches by holding him on where he could then steal. So that would add a strategy. Oh, and with 2 strikes on a batter who keeps fouling the ball off, that gets to be torture. Once a batter has 2 strikes on him, he has a maximum, I would say, of 2 foul balls to foul it off. If he fouls it off a third time, he's out. There's got to be less time between innings. The pitcher doesn't need all that time to warm up. As soon as he gets out to the mound, let him throw to the first baseman like 3 times back and forth. Just limber up your arm. Let him go in the tunnel or something and limber up a little bit. But between innings, let him take the field, resume the game immediately. I don't want to see 7-inning games, even though I like 7-inning doubleheaders. That's pretty good, I think. But there's got to be less time between innings and mound visits. That's got to be capped. Maybe a 2 mound visits a game. A mound visit should just be for strategy. I don't want to see a manager go out there to ask the pitcher how he's feeling and wasting our time, giving the bullpen more time to get ready, stalling for time, and so on. We've got to speed the game up. I mean, we've got to make it about a half hour less than it is, or 20 minutes. And any amount of time would be welcome because the games are lasting too long.
Well, Jack, we'll let Doc go last because we're going to have to let him go probably after this debate since he's here till 9. I guess it depends on what they decide they would want to implement, Jack. They have included reviews of home runs. They've included whether the player is safe on a base or not. That's slowing the game down. Every aspect of baseball is based off history and ritual, which for the most part has been kept intact. The batter stepping out of the batter's box to adjust his gear, the pitcher stepping off the mound, as you mentioned, to rub the baseball or to adjust his cap. In his ritual, after the catcher gets hurt, calls a timeout and he rushes off the plate to give the catcher a chance to, get himself back together. You could tell the umpire or the ump you're intentionally going to walk someone. You could do that. But what happens if the pitcher throws a ball away from the catcher on one of those pitches? I mean, the runner goes in scoring position, maybe scores from home. Adding a DH has slowed down the game. I mean, you have great hitters up there that can foul the ball off. as opposed to hitters that the pitcher's hitting the ball that, either going to sacrifice or they're going to stand there and try and get a walk for the most part. There are a few good hitting pitchers out there. Which is almost, make the pitcher throw faster, Jack, as you said, will lead to more walks. I mean, he's not going to concentrate as much, which will maybe take the game to play longer. Making the batter get in the box faster will do what? I mean, what will it do? Will it make him not watch the pitches? Will it make him, not foul the ball off? And if you're going to tell the batter he can't foul off pitches, I mean, what are you doing? You're changing the game. No more visits to the mound by the pitching coach or the catcher or manager to keep the pitcher in longer, to give up more walks so he's not concentrating, he's not making his adjustments. I mean, that will also, in one way or another, that will make the game longer. It's a game that is 3 hours long, Jack. It's been that way for the history of baseball. I mean, if you like baseball, if you enjoy baseball, that's the game. That's the order of the game. It's not a made-for-TV game. I mean, not really. I mean, it's meant to maybe listen on the radio, maybe to go and watch. I mean, there's a lot of dead time. I understand that. But something? I mean, any kind of changes you make to the basic format of baseball changes the game. And if you don't like that, then maybe you shouldn't be a baseball fan. The game is what it is.
Mac, a 3-hour game is fine with me. I don't like the 3.5 to 4 hour games.
So
3 hours is fine if that's where we could draw the line.
So you're gonna restrict the batter from hitting foul balls, falling off pitches to try and get his pitch?
We have to do so. Well, that's a rule. We would get used to it. Listen, one of the beauties of baseball, and I think Doc would agree from an entertainment viewpoint, was watching managers argue with umpires, fans debating calls, whether he was safe or out. And the replay maybe took that away from us.
Yeah.
Okay,
so Doc,
to an extent
Doc,
at least. So things do change.
What do you think, Doc, before you have to leave?
All right. So I am not in favor of ever making any of these rules that change the game. I don't like the 7-inning doubleheader. I don't like the pitcher has to come in and face 3 batter rule. I don't like the idea of you can only throw to first 5 times, because then on that 6th pitch, the runner's going. If it's Ricky Henderson or it's somebody like that, they're going. And he's going to be safe 99.9% of the time, because he's going to get a running start with no question that the pitcher has to come home. So I don't like fouling things. I still play baseball, but I also still play competitive softball. And even with in an old man like league like I'm playing in, they decided to limit the amount of foul balls you can hit. If you hit 2 foul balls with 2 strikes, you're out. And it radically makes our games go quicker. But I'm a batter who likes to wait for his pitch, and I used to hit foul balls, and it changes the way you approach the game. And I don't think for any better to save 32 seconds for the guy who's going to hit a couple extra foul balls. So I have 2 moves that I've advocated for a long time that I think would vastly speed up the games. I am in agreement. I can't stay up late. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day because to get ready for my real job, which is being a school principal and working hard and doing all that. I often, not this year because we don't have school events, but work late into the night at school events and doing other things like that. So I can't stay up super late to watch a baseball game. And so I make the decision often to go to bed and say, well, I hope when I wake up, the Yankees won. Yeah. So we need to do something to let people enjoy the game and see the game to its conclusion. So here are my 2 ideas. Number 1, fewer commercials. If you limit the amount of commercials between innings, the game will go quicker. Get rid of 1 30-second commercial every half inning, and you're saving 8 to 10 to 12 minutes or whatever. Limit those minutes between pitching changes. You have only this amount of time. You don't have time for 47 commercials. Now, the argument against that has always been that baseball is going to lose revenue. Now, I'm not a marketer. I don't know anything about marketing. But I would have to think, with the law of supply and demand, if I were baseball and I were advertising or offering advertising slots, I were a business, would I rather pay more money to be one of only 2 or 3 commercials between innings, or less money to be one of 5 or 6 commercials between innings? Would I rather be the only car they see between the top of the first and the second of the top of the first and the bottom of the first? Or would I rather be, oh, look, I'll throw Hyundai up there, I'll throw Toyota in there, I'll throw a Ford in there. Like, if from a marketing standpoint, I would think, I'm not an expert, but I would think I would rather my car be the only car advertised in that time. I'd rather my beer be the only beer advertised in that slot. So you could leverage the fewer commercials and charge more for each commercial. That's an idea. I don't know if it works. I think it makes sense. My other idea, which we are in the day of replay, we're not getting rid of that. I've always felt that the idea that managers have a limited number of challenges is a gimmick. It's not designed to get all the calls right. It's designed to be a gimmick. It's designed to have a talking point. So there's a close play. Do I argue this one or do I save it? Now there's something to talk about. Oh, you shouldn't have saved it. Aaron Boone saves too many challenges. He doesn't, or Aaron Boone uses too many up, or whatever they're going to come up with. If you have, and then each time that happens, it's forever. The length of the game itself is less important if there's action. What people don't want is inaction.
Right.
And when you watch a bunch of guys standing around with big headsets on, arguing over whether a guy was safe or not, that's boring. That's just tedious. They often then also cut to commercial because it goes on and on. If you get a 5th umpire at every single game, and that umpire sits up in the booth with a headset on, and he talks to he or she talks to the home plate umpire, and they review every close play, every single one. We often know watching at home before they know on TV and before the manager even throws the silly flag or whatever to make the challenge. We often know if the guy was safe or out. If there was an umpire up there, they could judge every play very quickly and just say, guess what? The guy was out. Send it down to the home plate umpire. The home plate umpire goes up. By the way, we checked it. He's out. And then it goes on. There's no delay. There's no time. I think they do something like that in tennis. They review plays very quickly, and there's not a whole lot of downtime. Baseball can do that. They would just have to be willing to pay for one more umpire in the booth and the technology to have him talk to the home plate umpire to hold up the game if he's going to look at it or she's going to look at it for a couple more seconds. But 99% of the time before they check a play, you see the umpire stop, the manager stop. He looks to his dugout. They look to the guy. They check the guy in the video booth in the dugout. He comes out. He says, hold the play. Don't do it. Then they show the challenge. Then everybody stands around with the headphones. You'd save a ton of time if you just worked. If the idea was to get the calls right, then you would do that absolutely always. You wouldn't say you can only get them right if you're challenged. You wouldn't say, well, you made your 2 challenges. I know we just blew a call, but you're not allowed to ask. So I think that would fix the replay. And I think those 2 things, without changing the game, would make the game go quicker. Back to Jack's other points real quickly. Yes, the pitcher should stay on the mound. The batter should stay in the batter's box. That would also increase make the game go quicker. And the pitcher doesn't always need eight pitches between innings or whatever. The pitcher, you can get ready, especially if it was a quick half inning. You could get ready in 2 or 3 or 4 pitches. I pitch.
Very
I don't always take all my 8 pitches because you don't need them. You're warmed up.
Very true. And most stadiums have an area where you can stay warmed up inside the stadium itself. So great points, Doc. Great points, Jack. We got to let Doctor go. He can only be in for an hour with us. That's Dr. Paul Semendinger from the blog Start Spreading the News. It's an outstanding place to go and read everything up on the Yankees. He also has a book out right now called Scattering the Ashes, an award-winning book that is a great read, and it's about a family story, and it centers around the father and son relationship, and has sports involved in it as far as running and marathons go. And he's busy getting another book ready to be published called The Least Among Us, if I am correct, where players from the Yankees, and I'm not sure if he expanded to other players, actually get in for one game, and that's it. And it kind of fulfills their dreams and little stories about them. So, Doc, thank you for coming in. We enjoy having you, your knowledge, and you're a heck of a commentator. And we'll see you next week, my friend.
I can't wait. You guys. Thank you.
We'll see.
Have a great week.
We'll see whether the Yankees counterpunch this week.
Oh, let's
When
hope
you come in
so.
next
Go
week, we'll
Yankees.
see whether there's
Sign
new
'em
news.
all.
Or the Mets might surprise us again with another major signing.
That would be awesome.
We'll
This is
see.
fun.
It would be.
Yeah.
Have a great day, Doc, and we'll see you next Saturday.
Thank
So there you go, Jack. The great Dr. Paul Semendinger, who comes on every Saturday with us, does a heck of a job talking about the Yankees and Major League Baseball in general. And, great mind, a great commentator, and we're always happy to have him on, Jack.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. So we're going to have our official timeout, guys. We shall be back in 2 shakes of, I don't even know what the country's saying is for that, Jack. But we'll be back soon, folks. Stick with us, and we'll have more debates on the other side of the commercials.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma.
I love you too. Okay, how about tasting this stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211-INFO-LINE. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
If you talk and they will hear you every single time.
Oh, we're getting killed. Yeah, well, Kyle's not here. How come? Kicked off the team. Didn't Tim tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking there in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. 0 tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's the first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I've made it clear to Matt, that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so.
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's gonna be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he gonna know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it though, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking to kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Try.
Okay.
You're listening to the Mac and Jack Sports Show on Northeast Streaming Sports.
So good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show. I'm your host, Mac, with your co-host, the great Jack Hirsch. We're on Wednesday through Sunday, 8 to 10 a.m. live. Join us If you can, if not, well, we'll be on our Facebook pages. We're also on Spotify, so you can check out our shows there. We love having you in. We love having comments. Another Talking Baseball with Sal Angioletti has chimed in a couple times saying good morning. And the Blue Jays and the Yankees this year fight for the East.
Well, let's see if the Blue Jays sign DJ LeMayo, and there's some talk that they're seriously interested. That could really change the balance of power in the AL East.
It definitely could. We already know the Rays will be there, Jack. I would imagine the Red Sox.
I don't know. Will the Rays be there? I mean, they lost Snell and Morton. I mean,
that is true. That's true.
So,
but they do have a good young team. They did lose a couple of the best pitchers. That's a good point. I think the Red Sox will be back a little bit this year. They're still rebuilding with Cora there. He did a great job when he was there before. And I imagine the Red Sox have always been a kind of a lunch pail crew anyway. So
you don't mention the Baltimore Orioles, Mac. I hear they have a good farm system.
Yes, they do. And maybe if they
one of my grandsons is an Oriole fan. So
really. Well, there's
he's
nothing
too
wrong.
young to know. So
there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, hey, it's your favorite team. A lot of us have had favorite teams that have had a bad streak. I mean, the Orioles at one time were one of the best organizations in baseball not too long ago, Jack. Not for us anyway. So, So anyway, we're going to get back to our debates, Jack. And I always had a thought about the World Series. This is one of the only championships that is named the World, some kind of world competition. Of course, soccer has a World Cup with a bunch of teams from all over the world that compete in it. You have the NBA championship, the NHL championship. You have, the NFL Super Bowl. And but as far as the World Series go in the past, Jack, the all-star players from the United States used to go around and play, the Cuban All-Stars, the Japanese All-Stars and stuff like that in the past. Of course, they were all just kind of fun games. But I always thought, why don't they allow the champions from the Asian leagues and the champion from the Central American League, why don't they let them get involved in the World Series competition? I mean, we get a lot of great players from those leagues. I can go on naming all of them. I mean, we have Tanaka right now on the Yankees. Of course, Suzuki was a great player. And we get, from the past, we had Clemente, who was a Hall of Fame player, and we get El Duque for the Yankees as a pitcher. A lot of these leagues have very good teams, and I don't know if they could compete or not in these games leading up to the World Series. Maybe they could. Maybe they could get to the World Series itself and play against one of these American League teams. I know there might be travel issues, and maybe we would have to bring them over to the United States and give them a ballpark to play in, to call their home. And I know it would generate revenue from around the world. You're talking Asia and Central America, where these teams, if they were in the competition to get to the World Series, it would make baseball bigger around the world. And a lot of these teams from Korea and Japan and like I said, from the Mexican and Cuban leagues are pretty good teams. So as the Little League World Series goes, they allow them in, and some of them teams do win the World Series. So why not, Jack? Instead of giving more wild card teams in Major League Baseball, why not allow them in? Why not see how they stack up? Why not let them have a chance at playing in the World Series, Jack? I think it's a good idea. Maybe it might upset some people as far as historically, or if they just believe that that the United States baseball is better. But why not give them an opportunity? I mean, why not, Jack?
It just wouldn't work. Getting everyone on the same page, it just couldn't do it. They have different schedules, the different countries, the different time zones as far as the travel goes. And we follow Major League Baseball. We know our players in the United States. And then when I say we know our players, we know the famous ones, the good ones. There's so many roster spots that have filled in Major League Baseball. There are a lot of players we haven't heard of. You could mention a couple of players on the Colorado Rockies, and I'm going to say who. I'll have no clue which team that they'd even be on. But we do have what you're saying to a large degree. It's called the Olympics. It's called the World Baseball Classic. We do have these tournaments. The way you want to do it, the only fair way would be if every team was in peak form playing. And you can't possibly do that because of the schedule. You can't just have a team show up for Pan baseball for 3 weeks and then play best 2 out of 3 because no one would be in peak form because they haven't been playing all along. It just really couldn't be done. The World Series is the World Series. To invite other teams to play in it after we crown the World Series champion, do you think the Dodgers are going to be ready to play a team from Japan coming here? The World Series is the ultimate. You're saving your players for that. You're resting them. They're in peak form. They celebrate. They win the World Series. If a team came from South Korea, it would be nothing but an exhibition game to the Dodgers. Win or lose, that's like telling a team after they've won the Super Bowl, let's play the best teams from England and Australia. They couldn't get up for the games. Either you absorb those teams in the league, let South Korea send a team, make them part of Major League Baseball, and let them be in the league. But it couldn't be done because of travel restrictions. The United States, a team in the United States couldn't travel to Australia. What is it? Australia, Japan, 17-hour flights or whatever. It just logically couldn't be done. I mean, if we ever saw here in the United States, if we really believed for one moment that Japan, Korea, Australia had superior baseball teams to us, baseball teams that were just as good, we would play them in the summit. And the players would be up for it here in the United States. They take it serious. But it's just exhibitions. Listen, the World Baseball Classic, they play it. It's fun. I even wanted to go to the games last year. I was going to go in Florida. I was planning on going to some games, but the pandemic messed it up. But you want to know something? At the end of the day, it's an exhibition. If the United States gets beaten in that, if they get beaten in the Olympics, we want to win. But it's ho-hum to us. Who cares? What we care about is our team, in Major League Baseball. Getting everyone on the same page, doing it the right way. It just can't be done, unfortunately.
Well, what I'm saying, Jack, is I think, I understand all that stuff you're saying as far as having the World Series winner play there. What I'm saying, to play a game after the World Series, what I'm saying is why not involve them in the playoffs? Why not bring their best team over to the United States and let them participate instead of making more wild card teams for teams that shouldn't belong there? Why not bring the best team from Japan that won their championship over for the playoffs and the World Series competition? And let them go up against our major league teams here before they get to the World Series.
Well, no, that's intriguing, Matt. Actually, it's thought-provoking. Maybe save one wild card slot, but they have to come here. They have to get ready. They have to try to be in peak form, and we absorb them in our playoff system. But what's the stopping point? Invite a team from Japan.
Right.
Now a second from South Korea is going to want to come here. Then a third from Australia. Then New Zealand or whatever other countries. It gets to the point, now you're having like a World Cup tournament, and it kind of gets out of hand a little bit. In the World Cup soccer tournament, all the teams are basically on the same schedule. They all get into peak form together. But those countries, their season runs somewhat different from ours.
Right.
So they have to adjust to us. And we're going to have a bunch of teams and a bunch of players we never heard of competing for the World Series here. I mean, it's called a World Baseball Classic, Mac. That's what it's called. The United States participates against teams from other countries. So we do that. Instead of it being called a World Series, it's called a World Baseball Classic. We do it in the Olympics as well. So we do that. How serious does the United States take the Olympics? So. We won under Tommy Lasorda 20 years ago. Okay, the United States won in Sydney, Australia. But all in all, if the United States loses in the Olympics, it's forgotten about the next day. The World Baseball Classic, it's forgotten about the next day. Yeah, we could get an all-star team. We could have them playing the World Baseball Classic. But you know what the problem is, Mac? The World Baseball Classic is played usually in March, before the season is underway. So even if we send an all-star team, the best players in America to play in the World Baseball Classic, they're not in peak form. This is spring training for them. They're not at their best. Well, the players in the other countries have peaked for that. So it doesn't give you a fair reflection, but we participate anyway. And if a team from the Dominican Republic wins the tournament, we wish them well. And also, we have a lot of players from other countries playing Major League Baseball here. And for the World Baseball Classic, what's if Japan is playing here? We absorb them as a playoff team, their national team. What about the great Japanese players who are playing on the team in America? Are we supposed to give them back to Japan for that game?
No.
You know, it's kind of iffy.
That's what they do in the Olympics, Jack. I would, if I was to do something like this, I would not let them go to the team from the national. It would be the winner of that championship over from there, them players into our system for the competition. And I think some of them teams will probably be better than the eighth.
Well, let me tell you something, Matt. When they were talking to starting the World Baseball Classic, A-Rod, when he was the Yankee third baseman, says, I want to play for the Dominican Republic.
Right.
And can you imagine the Dominican Republic, who turns out great players, are playing the Yankees in the playoff game? We invite him in a slot, and A-Rod playing for the Dominican Republic. It would be bizarre.
Right. I agree with that, and I don't think that would be part of it. But I definitely understand a lot of points you made. So let's get to our next topic, Jack. We're going to go into the greatest organization in NFL history. Now, remember, this ain't a team. This is not a coach. It's not a player. It's the greatest organization. And you're up first with that, Jack.
Mac, I'll change my mind tomorrow, and I'll then change it Monday, and I'll change it Tuesday, and I'll change it Wednesday. You could pick several teams out of a hat. You could throw in a few names. As long as I see what are the names, I could think of 5 names. You could put them, take your hat off, Mac, and I'll pick it out. And whatever I pick out, I'll be comfortable with. When I made up my list, I decided to go with a team that has a lot of tradition, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I could have gone with the Packers. I could have gone with the Giants.
Sure.
A couple of other choices. I'm looking at longevity. They started in 1933. That counts for a lot, okay? So they're one of the old-fashioned NFL franchises. They go back so far. This is a great trivia question for someone. What was the Pittsburgh Steelers' first name? And their first name, very hard, it wasn't the Pittsburgh Steelers. Believe it or not, it was the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Right.
The same as the baseball team. And 8 years after they came into existence, 1941, they changed it to the Steelers. And they were bad. From 1933 to 1971, they only had 8 winning seasons. So how could they be the greatest franchise? But what they've done in the last 50 years has been phenomenal. And it starts with the coaches. You talk about a great organization. From 1969 to the present, they've had only 3 head coaches. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. They had great ownership with the Rooney family. So you'd like to work for guys like that, Mac. If you had to apply for a job, and have owners, a stable organization, that's who you'd want to work for, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They don't have all these great controversies, but after having only 8 winning seasons, and all those years from 1933 to 1971, they took off in the 1970s. And they've had the greatest run in Super Bowl history by winning 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. And talk about all the legendary players on all the other teams. None more so than the Steelers. I mean, Mean Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Lynn Swan, Franco Harris, Terry Bradshaw. Those are names to remember. There are a bunch of others. So those are kind of like legendary names. They're a stable organization. They continue to be in the mix year after year. They win year after year. I mean, they're not a controversial organization. And that's what I like about them. They don't have their ups and their downs. They're consistent all the time. Great organization. I give them a nod, but I fully realize there are few others you can make a great argument for as well.
Oh, Jack, I definitely agree with that. I mean, if you look at the Bears with Papa George Halas and Mike Ditka and their winning tradition, Green Bay with Lambeau and Lombardi, their winning tradition, also two teams that have been there and helped start the league. I agree with the Steelers.
What about the Giants, Mac?
Well, the Giants too.
They have a tradition.
The Giants too, and I agree with your Steelers observations and your thoughts because between the three coaches that they've had there, they've always been winning. So yeah. I mean, that's it, and we can't forget about maybe the greatest dynasty in the history of the NFL, the Patriots, since 2001. They've won 20 division titles in a row and 9 Super Bowls they've been in. They've won 6. I mean, it's
Mac, could I say something? The Patriots came into existence in the AFL in
right.
the early 60s,
right.
and they've had the greatest 2-decade run in history, but we're talking about all of history.
Right, but I'm just saying they would have to be considered as one of the greatest. I mean, just with that record. So I look, in the organizations that this hurts me, my heart to say this, Jack, but I went with the Dallas Cowboys, and how I feel about that. Besides their 5 Super Bowl championships, 10 conference championships, 23 division championships, 2 Hall of Fame coaches, Tom Landry, arguably the greatest coach and innovator in football history, and arguably the greatest team president, general manager in football history, Tex Schramm. They became America's team for a reason. Everything they did was for promotion and expansion of the team. First, they hired Tom Landry, Jack, who designed and implemented the 4-3 defense that's still used as 2 of the top defenses today. Then he came up with the flex defense, Jack, that took the linemen off the line of scrimmage and became the birth of the 3-4. He ended up on defense coming up with the nickel and dime packages, what people call prevent defense, where he took out linebackers and put in safeties and cornerbacks, extra ones on throwing downs. And he didn't stop on defense, Jack. He brought back the shotgun, the shotgun that everybody uses today as far as their base offense. So they had one of the greatest innovators in football. Tex Schramm goes to work. First team to use computers to access players and get information for draft picks. They use football analytics. It began in Dallas, Jack. I mean, this is what they did. They took percentages. They took what players did in the past, what other teams did, and they put that all down in a computer, which all teams do today. They provided 2 games on Sunday, Jack. I mean, they got the 4 o'clock slot over here in the East Coast, so it gave birth to a lot of new Dallas fans in the Northeast. I mean, you have Dallas fans in New York, in Mass, and in Connecticut. They became the second team to have the Thanksgiving Day game, if you remember, Jack. I mean, we always had the Bears and the Lions and Packers. Well, now we got Dallas, and who can forget the Dallas Redskin rivalry that they played almost all the time. So they not only did it on the field, Jack, they did it off the field. And then the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, Jack, the first organization to have professional cheerleaders. And the cheerleaders served as a purpose. They went across the world as ambassadors for the Cowboys. They went away to bases overseas. They went to big events. And, they were known everywhere through Europe, through Asia. So they marketed the team unlike any other team had done it. A coaching genius, a marketing genius, and the Cowboys, with their winning record, Jack, it's probably the greatest football organization in history.
If you're talking about the most charismatic organization in NFL history, if you're talking about the most glamorous organization in NFL history, yeah, it's the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys organization, but they haven't been to a Super Bowl since 1995, 25 years ago.
Very true.
If you're looking for stability, you know what the Cowboys remind me of? I used to work in recreation, and I had a partner. I wasn't good at bulletin boards, setting things up, a list of activities. We both had our jobs to do. He would set up the greatest bulletin boards, this guy, all the great activities, all the things going by. Someone would go in the lobby, they'd read it, they'd say, oh, this is great. The only thing, the guy didn't do half of what he put on the bulletin board, and the other half he didn't do too well.
Right.
I didn't have the fancy bulletin boards, but I was working hard, doing my job, doing it the right way, the way it should be done. And that's what it kind of reminds me of with the Cowboys. On the surface, it's glamour, charismatic, so on. But the Steelers have been your lunch pail organization, and they've been in existence about, 30 years longer than the Cowboys.
Sure.
That's got to be considered too. And they've been, who's been more successful on the field on balance? That could be an issue too. If we said that in 1995, you could give an edge to the Cowboys, but every year the Steelers in the mix, and the Cowboys are in the news every year. There's a difference. Even this year, we talk more about the Cowboys than the Steelers, and the Cowboys had a 6-10 record. The Steelers were 12-4. Yet we talk more about Dallas. Talk more about Zach Prescott than anyone on this, than Ben Roethlisberger's future. Because the Cowboys are the most charismatic, most glamorous team around, and especially on the Coach Landry when they had the flex defense, innovative, running the plays. That short run under Jimmy Johnson when they won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years.
Yeah.
They were great, but I give a little edge to the Steelers as an organization, greatest organization in NFL history. But you can't make a case for the Cowboys. You can make maybe even a great case for the Packers, and you can make a little case for the Giants. You mentioned the Chicago Bears. They haven't quite won enough, unfortunately. They were under Papa George Halas. They had all that tradition, and the 85 Bears, that awesome team they had, but they just haven't won enough, the Bears, over the years to be in the mix for that.
Yeah, I was looking at the angle of, what team innovated sports as well as one, and as well as put together organizations that copied. The Steelers are an excellent choice, Jack. That was my second. But I'm looking at marketing. I'm looking at how they set up the league as far as analytics and all that stuff. And they did a great job. And even though it hurts me badly to say it, because you know how I feel about the Cowboys, if I'm being honest, that's why I put them there. So, Jeff,
hey, listen, and even the cameras, they never. How many owners does the camera go on? But it always goes on Jerry Jones. So.
No doubt. And I think Jerry Jones is a clown. So anyway,
we're gonna. That's uncalled for.
I know, but I had to say.
I mean, that's uncalled for. Take a swipe at Jerry.
I know. We're going to take our last break for the show, guys. We'll be right back quick with the rest of our debate. Maybe we'll get to who's better, depending on how much time left. So far, it's a fast-moving show. So stick with us, and we'll be right back, folks.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Infoline. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
We all make choices. When it comes to alcohol, kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Bye-bye. Remember, I'm going to Alex's party.
Hey, have a seat for a second. Remind me about that party again.
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. They want guidance and honest answers to their questions. And it makes a difference when the message is consistent and part of everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
If you talk and they will hear you every single time.
Oh, we're getting killed.
Yeah, well, Kyle's not here.
Uh-huh.
Kicked off the team. Didn't Tim tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah, zero tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's a first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I've made it clear to Matt that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so.
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's gonna be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he gonna know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it, Bill, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Try.
Okay.
You're listening to the Mac and Jack Sports Show on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show. I'm your host, Mac, with your co-host, Jack Hirsch. Jack, we had a great guest on. If people are tuning in now that didn't listen, tune in next week at Saturday, same time. We'll have Dr. Paul Semendinger in, who is an unbelievable guest host who does a lot of Major League Baseball stuff with us, especially in the Yankees, realm, where he's an historian and knows a lot about the game. So if you like Yankees and if you like baseball, every Saturday he's on, Jack. We are on Spotify for those who can't see us on video. We're on Spotify so that, you can listen to the show. We're also share our shows to different places, Mac Sports and Northeast Streaming Sports, where, there's a bunch of shows there now that will give you all kinds of sports shows in one place. So it's a great place to go to see a lot of shows, including ours. And with that, Jack, we'll get back to our debate show. And next, I want to go to the biggest draft bust, Jack, in the history of the NFL. And I'm going first right now. Originally, I was going to go with Dwayne Haskins because he was more current. But as I thought about it, Jack, I thought about a player who was overhyped by the media so much that his nickname led to the title Johnny Football, and that, of course, is Johnny Manziel. Wins the Heisman Trophy. He wins the Danny O'Brien Award, the Manning Award, Associate Press Player of the Year Award, Sporting News Player of the Year Award, SEC Offensive Player of the Year Award, all in 2012. He's drafted number 22 by the Browns in 2014. And as an NFL quarterback, Jack, he had 7 TDs and 7 interceptions. This high school superstar was fined $12,000 in a preseason game for flipping off the Washington quarterback, Brian Hoyer. In his first start against the Bengals, Johnny Football, he was intercepted twice and sacked 3 times in 2015, was brought in off the bench, and when he finally gets the starting quarterback job for the rest of the season in November, the video of him partying in Texas on the bye week was published, and he was demoted to 3rd string. Manziel sat out the last game of the season with a concussion, with a report circulating he was in Vegas instead of with the team that weekend, which the Browns came back and said that he was not checked in with the team that weekend. He was investigated for domestic abuse, and that got him finally kicked off the Browns. Moving to CFL, Manziel played 8 games with 5 TDs and 7 interceptions. The CFL decided to cut him because of his failure to go see a psychiatrist, which they demanded he do in order to sign the contract. His off-field antics, his agent dropped him. Nike ended his sponsorship. His father called him a druggie, hoping he went to jail. And he was suspended one time for the NFL substance abuse policy. Never have I seen, Jack, a player more publicized, a first-round draft pick that just completed and exploded into fire than Johnny Manziel.
Well, this is a topic that brings me no joy to talk about because we're talking in a very negative way. And we do talk about negative things in sports all the time. Let's not kid ourselves. It's our job. It's not all happiness. There's winning, there's losing. When teams lose, that's an automatic negative most of the time, at least. So we do talk about that. So it hurts me to call someone a bust, a failure, so on. It really does. But we have to look at expectations. What did we expect? In the case of Johnny Manziel, the Cleveland Browns traded to move up to number 22 to get him. So just think of that. He was taken number 22 in the draft, meaning 21 teams bypassed on him. So how can he be the biggest bust in NFL history? 21 teams didn't expect that much out of him, so they didn't take him. The one I'm going to go with is the obvious choice on the surface, and that's Ryan Leaf. Because when Ryan Leaf was drafted out of Washington State, he was drafted 2nd overall in the draft. There was a big debate. Who should go first, him or Peyton Manning?
Right.
Thankfully for the Indianapolis Colts, they chose Peyton Manning. But you want to know something? Their coaching staff decided they wanted Peyton Manning, and the ownership allowed the coaching staff to make the decision over the scouting department of the Indianapolis Colts, who wanted Ryan Leaf. From a talent viewpoint, a physical viewpoint, you could make the argument that Ryan Leaf was better, had a stronger arm than Peyton Manning, and how he performed in college. But as soon as the San Diego Chargers, who traded up to the number 2 slot, got Ryan Leaf and he reported to camp, it was a mess. He had major maturity issues, and you get a quarterback, that's who you need as your leader. Your quarterback's got to be a leader, and Ryan Leaf couldn't handle it. He'd be arguing with the media. Junior Seau would have to hold him back when he was getting in an argument with the media member. It was that, and veteran players would see this young kid, this young rookie who was supposed to take their franchise to another level. They would see him acting like a kid. So immature was he. Ryan Leaf, because of his potential, anyone who's picked number 2 overall in the draft, they're going to spend some seasons in the league. Because as you know, Mac, when one team cuts them, a couple of other teams are going to always pick them up because they're going to think they could maybe do for that guy what the other team couldn't, or they're going to think they could catch lightning in a bottle. Maybe he'll suddenly mature. Maybe he'll get back to his old ways and we'll get a steal by getting the type of player that they thought that guy would be coming out of college. But Ryan Leaf played for 5 seasons for 4 teams. San Diego gave up on him. He went to Tampa Bay, then he went to Dallas, then he went to Seattle, and he just wasn't dedicated. He just wasn't making great efforts to improve, according to his last coach, Mike Holmgren at Seattle. He's played in 25 games in the NFL, started 21. His TD to interception rate was awful, 14 TD passes, 36 interceptions, and his off-the-field troubles. I mean, that was, really bad. Ryan Leaf now says the problem was not his attitude. He just wasn't that good. That's easy to say, I wasn't that good. He certainly was that good in college.
Yeah.
For a lot of people to be split, whether it should be him or Peyton Manning, who should go number 1 in the draft. And by being the number 2 overall draft and a strong number 2 pick, not like this year, Trevor Lawrence is going to be a consensus number 1 pick of nearly everyone. Whoever's number 2 is going to be a distant number 2. No one's running neck and neck with Trevor Lawrence, but Ryan Leaf ran neck and neck with Peyton Manning. So the expectations had to be great. And San Diego wouldn't have traded up the way they did to get to the number 2 slot if they didn't expect greatness out of him. And ESPN in 2004 did a poll, the biggest sports flop of the last 25 years, and Ryan Leaf, won that. And if we talk about the associate draft busts, there have been a lot of them.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of them. Let's not kid ourselves. I could think of another number 2 pick that was a quarterback that people will even forget his name, Achilles Smith, who went to the Cincinnati Bengals. He never quite cut it. Blair Thomas, great running back at Penn State. I mean, he wasn't that bad of an NFL player, but certainly he didn't live up to expectations. I mean, the Jets got Vern Goldstein, recently. He didn't quite cut it.
You can add Archie Griffin to that, 2-time Heisman Trophy award winner that ended up going. I think he finished his seasons with the Rams, and for a 2-time Heisman Trophy winner who was supposed to be the best back in the in the game twice in college football, he didn't pan out either. The only reason why I picked Johnny Manziel was because of the publicity, and that's what either hypes up a player or destroys a player, or maybe gives the wrong opinion of a player. They hyped him up like he was the new Fran Tarkenton, and with all his videos that were posted of him partying all the time, not taking the game seriously, not studying, that's why I picked him. But Ryan Leaf is an excellent.
Johnny Manziel wasn't considered a can't miss based on his talent.
True.
If you, let's say both Ryan Leaf and Johnny Manziel, if you eliminated off the field issues, scouts looked at Ryan Leaf as the much better talent. A
much bigger talent. I mean, Johnny Manziel has had unbelievable college games where he beat some national champion contenders. I mean, he was one of the dual threats. I think he passed for 3,000 yards and ran for 1,000 yards one season, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, on capability, I mean, you could say Ryan Leaf was the more of a quarterback you think of, but Johnny Manziel was dynamic.
And it's all relative to what we expect. Take Tony Mandarich. A lot of people might say, think of him as one of the biggest busts in NFL history. But what people don't realize, Tony Mandarich didn't live up to expectations. His career was a big disappointment, but he played 8 years in the NFL, and he actually went to 1 Pro Bowl.
True.
So he actually had some success in the NFL, but people think of him as being a bust. In the case of Ryan Leaf, terrible maturity issues. Had Ryan Leaf taken the game very seriously, really taking the game seriously, at the very worst, he would have had a career like RG3. He would have hung around the league, Some players, they don't live up to expectations, but they'll have a 10-year career, They'll have an NFL career. But in the case of Ryan Leaf, I mean, everything that was expected. Maybe the biggest curse for Ryan Leaf was coming out the same time as Peyton Manning. Because if
That
he
could be
didn't come out the same time as Peyton Manning, no one would, you wouldn't have anyone to compare him to.
true.
And Marcus Mariota, he was drafted number 2 overall in the draft. He's now a backup for the Raiders.
Yeah.
Had Peyton Manning been drafted number 1 instead of Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota number 2, had there been a comparison, people would have been comparing Mariota to Manning. So Mariota's career would have taken a major hit to perception.
Right.
So maybe
And
that was the worst thing that ever happened to Ryan Leaf, Peyton Manning.
you could add Mariota, you could add Winston on that list too, somewhere down the scale. But yeah, great point on that. So let's hit our last topic before we get to who's better, because I don't think we'll have time for one of the other topics we have. So let's go to the best athletes in the world, Jack. I mean, any athlete that you can think of, who has the best athletes, Jack?
Oh, easy. Whoever does the decathlon, those are the greatest athletes in the world, point blank. They have to do so many things. Now, if you're talking about just the skill thing, golf might be the hardest to master, for one particular thing. But are you really going to tell me, you put the greatest 25-year-old athlete, at the peak of his physical powers against a man that's 30 years older, and the man 30 years older could always beat him at golf? It's not because he's a better athlete. He mastered that particular skill.
Sure.
I mean, not that golf doesn't have a certain degree of athleticism, but come on. I mean, it's basically one-dimensional in comparison. But for the guys who do the decathlon, it's amazing what they do. And the greatest athletes in the world couldn't do it. It's a 2-day event. The first event everyone could do, run the 100 meters. Everyone does that as a kid, runs as fast as they can. But then it gets harder, the discus throw. You have to do all this within an hour, day 1. Throwing a discus, man, that's a lot of technique. Then there's something I could never have done for the life of me, the pole vault. Running with the pole, getting up. Imagine teaching that, how hard that is to master. Then they got to do the javelin throw. Get the best quarterbacks in the business and try to make them do the javelin throw. It would be fun to watch. They would be struggling. We would be laughing. Then there's the 400-meter run, which is really one time around the track, but it's hard. Then the second day, there's the 100-meter hurdles. Hurdling, running at top speed and hurdling, you have to know. Then we go to the long jump. We all did that as kids. Okay, we can manage that. But then you go to the shot put. You're holding that thing and you're turning. Oh, man. I'd just be scared I would drop it on my foot.
Yeah.
Okay, it's so hard. Then there's the high jump. That is so hard to do, like to run and then do the Fosbury flap, go backwards, go over the bar. And then you end the event within an hour. The 1,500-meter run, the 1-mile run, you're exhausted by then, but you're pushing it out the 2-day. It's a 2-day event. These guys, whoever wins the decathlon should be crowned as the greatest athlete in the world.
And a lot of times they are, Jack, because that is one of the hardest competitions you can be in. There's no doubt about it. And the majority of us probably couldn't do 2 of the events. And we sure couldn't do all the
And
events.
I could say one thing before you go, Mac. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned it. It's a 2-day competition. There are 10 events. There's a point system. I'm not sure how the crazy point system works. But if you foul up in just one event, it'll knock you out of the competition, meaning you could do great in 9 out of 10. And that happened to Dan O'Brien in the 1992 United States Olympic trials. He messed up on the high bar. For some reason, he was given 3 chances. He couldn't clear the short height. He choked on the high bar. And even though he did really well on the other 9 out of the 10 events, he didn't even make the Olympic team. And he was the favorite to win the gold medal before that.
And I remember when Bruce Jenner won, the decathlon, he was hailed over here as the greatest athlete in the world. But I'm going to go with something I'm surprised you didn't take, Jack, and that's boxers. Strength, speed, will, toughness, stamina. I found I was just surprised that you didn't take it. So I'll take boxing for the simple fact, Jack. How many former athletes from other sports have tried to transfer into boxing and they haven't been successful? Many have tried. One I remember is, of course, is Too Tall Jones, who was a massive man. I think he was 6'11", 6'9", or 6'11", 260 pounds, trying to fight heavyweight division, and the smaller guy took it to him. He was about 5'10". I can remember a lot of dual players for football and baseball. You had Bo Jackson. You had the great cornerback from the Atlanta Falcons. His name is slipping my mind right now, but he played for the Yankees and the Falcons at the same time. Deion Sanders, probably one of the greatest cornerbacks in the history of football. But none of that happens in boxing, Jack. There are other sports explosive as boxers. But to do that for 10 rounds, they can't. In fact, we've had John Scullion saying that there have been other people that played professional sports, and they couldn't even last a 2-round sparring session. So we look at boxing. I look at boxing, Jack, as the ultimate sport. You could, I guess, put wrestling in there too, real college wrestling, where it's one-on-one, man versus man. There's nobody helping you. The decathlon is a great choice, but I still think that the training that goes into boxing to actually get in there and box for 3 minutes doesn't seem like a long time. But after you get to that second round, it feels like an hour. And then you get that short little 1 minute rest in between rounds, enough to get water squirted on you and maybe catch your breath for a second, and you're back at it again. I've tried boxing before in the past, Jack. I won one sparring session, but for the most part, the people I boxed beat the hell out of me. So, I was winded. I was winded by the 4th, 5th round. So, I understand that decathlon has a lot of events at once, and maybe boxing is only one event, but you're boxing different people, different heights, different weights, different stamina, different quickness, and it requires not only your stamina and your will, but also a strategy that goes in to boxing somebody else who might be stronger or faster than you. So even MMA athletes have tried it, Jack. We remember McGregor trying his hand at it. And you got to admit, MMA athletes are tremendous athletes. But when they go up and they box against a real boxer, they have problems. There have been a lot of exhibition fights. Lyle Alzado was one of them against Muhammad Ali. Alzado, much bigger, much probably stronger than Ali. But this is Muhammad Ali we're talking. So that's why I picked boxing, Jack. I know you know boxing more than I do. But
Mac, boxers are the best conditioned athletes in the world.
Yes, and
it's a great skill. An athlete can't come from another sport and compete with a boxer. Okay, there was talk years ago of Wilt Chamberlain fighting Ali, and they were serious negotiations. And there were people who actually thought Chamberlain had a chance to win. He would have been badly embarrassed, badly humiliated had he took Ali on. He wouldn't have had a prayer of, competing well, let alone winning. But if you're looking about best athletes, we're not talking about endurance. We're not talking about skill set. Boxing is about willpower, condition, and skill set, but it's not necessarily the best athletic ability. Because if we look at the great fighters of all time and we look at their background in sports, it's usually only in sports. Muhammad Ali didn't play high school basketball or football. Joe Frazier didn't play those other sports. George Foreman didn't. Tyson Fury didn't, for the most part. They're boxers, pure and simple. That's right. What they do. They do it great. And Floyd Mayweather, what sports was he good? And I went to York College to see a charity basketball game that were held by elite boxers like Tommy Hearns and so on. Those guys weren't good. Those guys were not good. It was fun to watch them, but they just weren't that good. I believe that I believe you have at least a chance of taking an athlete from another sport and turning him into a boxer, and maybe you'll get once in a while get one of them to compete and maybe be really good and maybe turn them into a contender champion, you have a chance. But you're not going to get boxers and make them decathletes and make them do the decathlon and have a serious chance of any success in that.
Well, I'm not sure about that, Jack. I think with their way they run all the time, the way they train, the way they do strength exercising and stuff like that, I think you might get one that might.
I'm talking about on the world class level.
Yeah, I understand. But anyway, so we're into our last segment, Jack, and that's who's better. And I've restricted it to one lane here, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on this because, you know, we talk about the players on teams all the time, but we really don't talk about, you know, who runs the show and who will put, you know, the teams in the best positions to win. So I'm going to ask you on who's better here in this segment, the coaches in the playoffs. So who's better, Jack, Mike Tomlin or Andy Reid?
I'm going to go with Mike Tomlin, even though Andy Reid's the defending Super Bowl champion. People forget, before last year, Andy had a reputation of kind of choking in the playoffs, not getting it done. He finally got over the top. True, Mike Tomlin has only won one Super Bowl himself, but he's been in the mix all the time, and I'll give a little edge to Mike Tomlin there.
Okay, John Harbaugh of the Ravens or Pete Carroll of the Seahawks, Jack?
I like John Harbaugh's cool demeanor with his team and so on. Pete Carroll, very excitable, obviously an excellent coach, but I would trust John Harbaugh, you know, a little more. Look, with Pete Carroll, how could I go for him not handing off to Marshall Lynch, you know, in that Super Bowl, in the pass intercepted by Russell Wilson? So I'm not going to sing the praises of Pete Carroll in that spot.
All right. The Bills head coach Sean McDermott or Tennessee's Frank Reich?
Mike Vrabel for Tennessee, I mean. In the Frank.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Well, let's
Frank Reich. Yeah.
To the Colts. So we're gonna go
Frank Reich or Sean McDermott.
Right, or yes.
Man, I have to go with Frank Reich. He's been through it all. A backup quarterback for Jim Kelly on the Bills for 4 years. He was the offensive coordinator for the Eagles when they won the Super Bowl 3 years ago. The Colts have improved greatly under his leadership. Sean McDermott has been wonderful with Buffalo. Let's see him win a playoff game first. Okay? They've improved greatly under him, but let's see him get something done in the playoffs. I go with Frank Reich.
Okay, so as you said for the Titans, Mark Vrabel or Bruce Arians of the Bucs?
Mike Vrabel and Bruce Arians. Well, Mike Vrabel's like the new kid on the block. They had that great run last year, came away from the Super Bowl. Bruce Arians, wow, he got kind of a weird group there at Tampa Bay, doesn't he? A ton of talent and coming together. Well, I just don't know who would be better, who I trust more in the playoffs. You know, I have to go with Bruce Arians only because he has more talent. It's not the guy himself, I'm not sure, but the more talent is there. So based on that, I would think he's not going to mess it up.
And you would give him maybe a little edge in experience too. So Chicago's Matt Nagy or Matt LaFleur from Green Bay, Jack. I just remember coaches now. We're not talking about players.
Mike LaFleur. Because Matt Nagy, he ran into a problem this year. We had to give up the play calling. They had a controversy. So he basically had to throw in the towel. He didn't want to do that. There's been a quarterback controversy. He hasn't handled that well. If during today's playoff game, Mitch Trubisky's struggling a bit, does he pull him or leave him in? And we're still going to have that debate. I mean, Matt LaFleur's in a better situation, but in all fairness, when you have Aaron Rodgers, you don't have too many decisions to make. It makes you look pretty smart.
So the last one, Jack, I'm going to give you before we go here because we're getting close. Ron Rivera, you know, Riverboat Ron, or Sean McVay of the Rams?
I'll go with Riverboat Ron. I like his style. He has the guts to go for it when other people say you should kick a field goal. He's been around. He's a little more fearless. And so I would go with him.
Okay, Jack. So Folks, thanks for tuning in to the Mac and Jack Sports Debate Show every Saturday, 8 to 10 a.m. Tomorrow, we'll have our big football show, preview show, with fantasy expert Anthony Servino for Fantasy Football Face-Off, and Robert Butler from Sports Scope with his thoughts on football in general. I mean, Jack, two great guests do a great job for us. We have a lot of fun breaking down the games, folks. So join us tomorrow. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day, Jack.
3 big games.